Thank you so much for joining me, Javacia. I met you a while ago. We actually met when I did the TEDx Birmingham. That was like 2017, I think.
No, that
Was
was
it?
2019
Good
is
with
when
dates.
I think, yeah, 2019 is when you did your TED Talk. So I
My TED
probably met
Talk.
you in like 2018.
Okay, yes, that's definitely when we met. So I'm excited to have you on. I think you have an amazing story. So I thought we'd start off first with you telling us about your writing business and how you got into that, first off.
Sure. So I've been writing my whole life. And so the business is C. Jane Write, which is a website and community for women who write. But in addition to that, I am a freelance writer. So I write for media outlets, but I also do content writing for businesses, organizations, public figures. But I started doing all of that while I was still working as a teacher. But prior to working as a teacher, I was an on staff reporter. So, like I said, I've been writing all my life.
Yeah.
And I worked at a newspaper in Louisville, Kentucky. Left that job in '09 to move to Birmingham and to teach. And I taught at the Alabama School of Fine Arts, which is a fine arts school. It's kind of like Fame, or if you're too young to know what Fame is, it's like Glee. That's what I always say. But while I was teaching there, I was writing. I was freelancing. I started CJ and Write mainly for selfish reasons because I wanted a community of women writers. I couldn't find the community that I wanted, so I just made it myself. And and then in 2019, actually just days after your TED Talk, I put in
Mhm.
my resignation letter.
Oh, wow.
My teaching job. Actually, I think it may have been like a few days before your TED Talk, but around that
That's
same
so
time,
funny.
I put in my resignation. Not because I disliked my job, because I actually loved my job. I loved teaching, but I was just doing too much and something had to go. And so I left teaching. Um, I left the classroom, I should say. I'm still always teaching in different ways. But I left the classroom in 2019 to do my writing and my writing coaching full time.
Okay. So yeah, you've been writing, like you said, all your life. I feel like that's how I know you. Like whenever I think of writing, I think of you, just
Good. I
because
love when people say that.
I do. I always do. I have been writing for a column called P&H News, and whenever I write, I'm like, what would she say? Like, what would she say about this writing? You helped
Oh,
me write
thank
my
you.
TEDx talk also, so you're great at that. It's funny because my TEDx talk was on relationships with chronically ill patients. And you helped me with that writing. And then, how long was it after that TEDx talk in 2019 where you diagnosed yourself?
Not even a full year. So your TEDx talk was May of 2019, and then I was diagnosed January 24th of 2020.
Oh, wow. And
So
yeah, if you want to tell us a little bit about that journey of how what led up to the diagnosis.
yeah, so I am a breast cancer survivor. I had absolutely no symptoms, nothing at all. I was under the age of 40, but my primary care physician at the time really wanted me to get a mammogram early because the statistics and research show that black women, although we get diagnosed with breast cancer around the same rate as our white counterparts, we have a 40% greater chance of dying from breast cancer. And when it is diagnosed, it's usually at later stages and earlier ages. And it's usually a more aggressive form. And so my primary care physician really wanted me to get a mammogram early. I put it off for like 2 years. And then in December of 2019, I finally made the appointment. And then I had the mammogram in January of 2020. and they said, something's wrong here. First, they did an ultrasound, and then they're like, yeah, something funky is happening here. So then they did a biopsy, and then they said, I have cancer.
Wow. What were your feelings around that time? Like, were you scared, nervous? How did you feel about that?
At the time of the diagnosis, I am very, very type A, which
Yeah.
people who know me know that. And I'm an Enneagram 1, and we can turn our emotions off very, very easily to just do like what needs to be done. We're all about order. So I met with the doctor for her to give me the test results, and I knew what the results were before she said anything because she walked into the room with a huge box of tissues, and I'm
Mm.
like, that's not very subtle.
No, not at all.
So she walks in with her huge box of tissues, plops it on the table,
Uh,
tells me I have cancer. And, I know she's expecting me to cry.
mhm.
And I literally just pulled out my notebook and a pen and was like, okay, what do we need to do?
Mm.
That was my reaction. Now, and to be honest, that was kind of my attitude through most of it. Later, there would be, breakdowns, emotional breakdowns. At the time of my diagnosis, I was told I would not need chemotherapy and that I would just have to have surgery and radiation and I'd be done. Not like either of those are easy, but most people, the goal is to avoid chemotherapy because it's
Yeah.
so harsh. Um, and I initially was told that I would not have to have it. And then after my surgery and they did the pathology on the tumor, found out that my tumor was crazy town. They were like, "Yep, you're gonna have to have chemo." And that was the first time that I broke down.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you already had this plan in your mind. It sounds like by that time, and then the plan had to change again.
Yeah.
And for you with the organization, I mean, that probably was like it messed up what you probably thought it would look like.
It's very much like, okay, I'm gonna get this surgery, do this radiation, and then I'm just gonna
Hmm.
get back to my life.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
then chemo meant, first of all, that this was gonna have to go on. This treatment was gonna have to go on for way longer than I thought. It also meant I was gonna have to tell people because at this point I hadn't told anyone except my husband, obviously, my parents, my brother, and a few very, very close friends.
Hmm.
But that was it. I hadn't told anyone else. And I wasn't planning to tell anybody else. And with chemo, I knew I was going to have to tell people because I wasn't going to have any hair. And as you can see, I have a lot of hair.
Yeah,
People
it's grew
call
back.
me. Yeah, it
Beautiful.
grew back. Yeah, spoiler alert, it grew back. But, people call me like the girl with the hair. And so
Yeah.
to go from the girl with the hair to the girl with absolutely no hair, people were going to notice that.
Yeah.
So, and even though it was 2020, so it's not like I was going out socializing, because of Seizure and Right, I am very visible online. So I was still like going live on Facebook and, doing stuff on Instagram and all of this stuff. And so even though I wasn't out and about, because no one was, because of the pandemic, I was still visible,
Hmm.
and people were going to notice if I suddenly had no hair. So,
Yeah.
so yeah.
I feel like that's one thing too, like being a female that has dealt with a cancer diagnosis or any chronic illness. It's that identity, it's that change in your life that's, as a woman, it's hard. Like, I was thought I would have to get chemo at one time too, and that
Mhm.
was one of my thoughts is I'm gonna be bald.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be a 25-year-old bald person. Like,
Yeah.
am I okay with this? But yeah, it's that change, that sudden change too.
Hmm.
How quickly after your diagnosis did you start your treatment?
So chemo didn't happen for a while because,
Hmm.
like I said, initially they didn't think I would have to have chemo. And there's this test that they can give you called the oncotype, and it will tell them if chemo will be beneficial for you or not. And so then I had to wait for those test results and all of that. So I was diagnosed in January. I had my lumpectomy in February. I didn't start chemo until May
Oh, okay.
because during all of that time they were trying to figure out if I was going to actually need chemo. And then once um, they said yes, then they were waiting on me to say yes because they can recommend chemo and you can say
Mhm.
no. And so I was kind of going back and forth over whether or not I was going to do it. And then eventually I decided, okay, yes, I need to do it. And then I had to get my chemo port placed. And so I had to have surgery for that. So it was a lot. And so I didn't start chemo until the beginning of May.
Okay, yeah. So it sounds like they want to do some more tests, which makes sense,
Yeah.
and give their recommendations. You talk about your support system, your family, your husband, your friends, your close friends. How important was that to you during your journey?
It was very important, although it looked different than it
Mhm.
probably has for other cancer survivors because of the pandemic. So my support system could not physically be there with me,
Oh,
except for my
wow. Yeah.
husband, obviously. Um, but even though people couldn't physically be there with me, I felt very supported, very loved, particularly by the women of C. Jane Wright, because and this is not an exaggeration, but during my treatment, there was a package on my doorstep every single day,
Ah,
every single day from someone in the C. Jane Wright community, or even someone who's maybe like I just met through writing. Maybe they're not a part of the community, but I just met them through writing or something. Every single day, there was something on my doorstep. Every single
oh,
day.
that's so sweet. How did that make you feel? I mean,
I
because you
was,
feel lonely during that time.
yeah, I was so overwhelmed with joy and
Yeah.
gratitude. And it was totally unexpected. Not that I didn't think that, the women of CJ Wright are lovely people, but I mean, we were all going through crap that
Yeah.
year, right? Because we were all in the middle of a global
True.
pandemic. So I really didn't expect anyone to be thinking that hard about me, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that in a self deprecating way. I'm just saying because everybody had stuff that year,
Yeah, it's
you know?
true.
So for people to do that, it really meant a lot.
Yeah. I always say too, when you're battling a chronic illness, is that you battle it physically, mentally, and emotionally. And they're not always in check, all three of them, but when one of them is like out of whack, you can feel it in
Yeah.
different ways. So, speaking to like your mental health, what were some ways that helped you kind of try and stay in a positive state, or just kind of make it through the day? What were some tips?
Yeah. So the number one thing I did, and I know this is cliche because I'm a writer, but the number one thing was journaling. That helped so very much. Um, and not just your typical like, oh, I'm writing down what I'm feeling right now, although that's great. But that alone was not enough because that
Mhm.
would have easily led to me just kind of spiraling out, you know?
Yeah.
So I did a lot of scripting, and scripting is a type of journaling. Some people call it manifesting. But it's a type of journaling where you're writing about the future that you want as if it is already true.
Oh, okay.
And so, a lot of times people do this to write about like big future goals, like 5 years from now or something like that. But something that I have always done, even before this diagnosis, is I like to also script about just the day, like scripting out, okay, I want this to be a great day. Here's what I want to be able to say happened by the end of this day, right? So I've always done that, or I've done that for a long time. During my cancer diagnosis, I would constantly script about December 31st, 2020. And here's why. New Year's Eve is my favorite holiday. I know that's weird, but it is. Uh, so New Year's Eve
I
was
like that though, because not a lot of people pick New Year's Eve.
that's my favorite holiday. And I knew that by New Year's Eve of 2020, I would be done with active treatment. My oncologist told me I would have an inch of hair by then,
I love that.
and that I would probably have my taste buds back. Because everybody talks about you losing your hair when you go through chemo, which is awful. But you know what's worse? You can't taste anything.
Yeah.
That's much worse. And so my doctor said, you should have an inch of hair and you'll probably have your taste buds back by the end of the year. And so I would just constantly script about December 31st, just kind of like imagining what I was going to do on that day, what I was going to eat, how I was going to feel. I would just script that constantly. So,
I
so
love that.
journaling was number one. The other thing that was really important was walking.
Mm-hmm.
So I love to walk. And I walked every single day in 2020, including the day of my surgery.
Wow.
Yeah, including chemo days, including radiation days. I walked for at least 30 minutes every single day in 2020.
No way. That is a really good goal to set for somebody that's going through chemo because there are days where it's hard to get out of bed.
Yeah.
So 30 minutes a day, wow, that's awesome. I also wanted to ask on December 31st, when you got to that day, what did you end up doing?
I actually did what I wrote.
Oh, really?
Amazing.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love that.
I did. Because, I mean, I was realistic about it. I wasn't like, it's December 31st and I went to
Yeah.
Bali. You know,
Yeah.
because I figured we would still be, on lockdown. So I basically like
Mhm.
wrote, in fact, and I was just sharing this with someone. So my book, which I think we're going to talk about my book later,
Yes, we
but
are. Yes.
there's a chapter. It's one of the chapters at the end. It's called the New Year's Eve, and most of that chapter is directly from my journal.
Oh, I love that. And I like the title, The New New Year's Eve.
Yeah. So, so
Oh,
yeah.
that's great. Yeah, we're going to talk about your book, and then for anybody that wants to check it out, I'll put it in the notes as well so they can check out your book. I know it's on Amazon, am I right? I
Yeah,
think I
it
looked.
is.
Okay. Oh, I love that. So, you went from writing all your life to having this cancer diagnosis of breast cancer. When would you say that you found out that you were, I always say healed, but when were you in remission from your cancer diagnosis?
I mean, I technically was cancer free in February when they cut the cancer out, right? But
Yeah.
then you still have to go through treatment because all that treatment is there to try to keep the cancer from coming back. Sometimes, if someone's tumor is very, very large, they will do they'll do the chemo and all of that first to try to shrink it and then have surgery. But I had surgery first, which is not unusual. So I had surgery first. So technically, I was cancer free once they cut the cancer out.
I
But
gotcha.
you still need to do other stuff to keep it from coming back or try to keep it from coming back. And that term cancer free, remission, those are very weird terms to most cancer patients because you never feel cancer free because you think about it all the time. You think
I
about it
understand.
less as you get
Yeah.
further and further away from that diagnosis date, but it's always still sitting there. You
Mm-hmm.
know?
It's always still lingering.
Yeah. So you're never really like cancer free.
Yeah.
So, typically the phrase that we use is no evidence of disease. I have not had evidence of disease. I've been NED, that's what they call it. I've been NED since, you know, my active treatment was done, or since 2020. So I'm done with active treatment, but I still there's medication that I have
Mm-hmm.
to take, and it has not so great side effects. So,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Were you writing your book during that time? Tell us about your book and the title of it and what it's about.
So, funny thing about this book, I actually wrote an early version of this book in 2017 and had beta readers and all of that. And then literally said it because one of my beta readers wanted a physical copy of it because that's the way she likes to read stuff. So I actually had like a printed out copy of it. Um, and I got my feedback from my beta readers, and then I did nothing. I literally took it and set it somewhere, and it was literally collecting dust. Like, not figuratively, it really had dust on it.
Since 2017.
Yeah, 2017. So, and the trouble I was having with it, and I actually talk about that in this book, in the version that I actually published, was that early version did not have focus.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which I realized one day I was going for a walk with my husband, and he said, I was mentioning to somebody that you're working on a book, and they asked me what it's about, and I couldn't really tell them. I didn't have an elevator pitch for it. So what is your elevator pitch? What is your book about? And I couldn't answer it. And that's the problem, right? And so
Yeah.
that was the issue with the one that I wrote in 2017. So it just collected dust, and now it's like, whatever. Maybe I'm not meant to write a book, and that's okay because I write all the time. I don't have to write a book. But then cancer happened, and suddenly I had a focus for my book.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I always say this isn't necessarily a cancer book. Like, what my book really is. So my book is called Find Your Way Back: How to Write Your Way Through Anything.
Mm.
And that's what it's about. So it's not just about cancer, although that is sort of the through line. But it's really about how I've used writing to help me through whatever life has thrown my way. And cancer just happened to be kind of, obviously, one of the biggest things that life threw my way. And so it's the through line. But I also talk about other things in here, like religion, my marriage, my childhood, my family. So, it's a lot of stuff. But, obviously weaving writing and words and things like that throughout the stories.
Tell me about your favorite chapter in your book and what's that about?
I have a few favorites.
Yeah.
So there are two that are about my mom, and those are actually my two favorites. One is called My Mother's Daughter, and the other one is called Daughters of Eve. One is kind of centered on cancer because it's me talking about when I got my surgery. But the other one is actually set years and years and years ago. So it's not really about cancer, although I do mention my cancer diagnosis in it, because that one, Daughters of Eve, is about my mother and my grandmother. And my grandmother had breast cancer. And so breast cancer does come up in that one, but it's not really what it's about. Those are my two favorites. But once the book came out and I started doing readings and everything, another one that became my favorite, because people love to hear it, is called How a Fourth Grade Bully Changed My Life.
Yeah.
And,
I like that.
I call this one my superhero origin story because I feel like my superpower is building community, and like I connect people together. That is, I mean, obviously I'm a writer, I'm a teacher, I do those things, but my secret superpower is I'm a connector. I bring people together, and I create community. And this story about this fourth grade bully is kind of like the first time I was creating community. Obviously, I didn't realize that's what I was doing. I was 9 years old. But I created community in response to this bully. So, people love this story. When I read it at readings, people are like, oh my gosh. So,
That's so interesting. Yeah. Anybody that wants to read it, you've got to go get the book now. I like the plug. That's a really cool way to put it too. It sounds like, yeah, community is something you've always been about. And earlier you talked about every day on your doorstep there was something from somebody, but it's because of the community you've
Yeah,
created.
yeah,
I love that every day you had something from people because it really just shows how much support and no matter what other people are going through, they truly care about you and what you're going through. But again, you've created that community, so of course you have that support system too.
yeah.
Yeah,
It was pretty fantastic.
that's awesome. For anybody that wants like a couple tips on, they want to start writing, they don't know where to start. What do you tell them to start writing? How do you get them there?
So you're not gonna like this, but just right.
Yeah.
That's the answer. Just right. I would recommend starting with journaling
Mm-hmm.
and start with how do I feel right now and why. Just start with that. Then when you're ready to go a little deeper, ask yourself, how do I feel right now and why? And what am I going to do about it? Right?
Yeah.
So, some people don't consider journaling writing because
Mm-hmm.
journaling is stuff that we typically are going to keep to ourselves, typically. But your journal entries could end up being an essay in a book, right?
Yeah.
um, but the thing, even if what you put in your journal you never show to anyone, what journaling does is it makes you comfortable with the act of putting your words on paper, putting your thoughts on paper. And the more comfortable you get with that, the easier it's going to be for you to then write something that you are planning to show to other people. You learn how you string sentences together. You start to find the joy in stringing sentences together. So I would always say just start journaling. And you can do free writing where you're just writing whatever comes to mind. You can use prompts. Um, I'm a huge fan of prompts. I love prompts. So I would say that just start journaling. Now, once you're ready to go like a little further than that, I would find a writing community. CJ and Write is here for you. Um, but also, it's good to have some sort of goal. Now, this goal doesn't have to be, I want to write a New York Times bestseller. It could just be like, I want to create a writing regimen. Like, I want a writing routine. That could be your goal. Or your goal could be, I want to write a complete personal essay or a complete short story or a poem. Like, start with some little goal that you have and then start working toward that. Get a writing community that can cheer you on and support you as you're working toward that goal. And then once you meet that goal, you set another one and another one and another one. And you just keep going.
I like that too. And you talk about your writing community. What is that support like when you have a writing community around you? Like, what all do you all do? What do you share with each other? How do you support each other?
Oh wow, we share everything. I mean, it's supposed to just be a writing community, but we've become like best friends, and we're each other's therapists and all the things. So,
Yeah.
but on the writing side, so just logistically, what we do is we have write-in sessions 4 days a week. And this is basically where you get on a Zoom call with other folks and you just write together. So we have that. But then in addition to that, we have, because CJ and Wright has, like over 100 members. And within that, we also have smaller groups. And so those smaller groups, they're like smaller accountability groups. They also meet on their own to either write, but also to kind of check in on each other to see, like, hey, how's it going with this thing that you said you were working on? So they have their own meetings as well. And then I do like goal setting sessions once a month. We do workshops once a month, and And all of this is virtual because our members are all over the country. However, we do have some in-person stuff. And in fact, we have two members who do not live in Birmingham. One lives in Pittsburgh, the other one lives in Texas. They love CJ and Wright so much that they're coming to Birmingham.
No way.
Yes, they're coming to Birmingham in a couple weeks. And so I'm kind of rolling out the red carpet for them and gonna show them around the city. And I've planned like a dinner with other CJ and Wright members, and then we're also gonna do a brunch. And so yeah.
Oh, a cool meetup.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, and I've done in-person stuff before, obviously, because CJ and Wright started as just a Birmingham thing. So in the beginning, everything we did was in person. But then people outside of Birmingham and even outside of Alabama started to learn about CJ and Wright and wanted to be a part of it. So I started doing kind of like half and half, where like half of our stuff was in person and half was online. Then COVID happened and everything went online. And it's kind of stayed mostly online since then. Again, I do have in-person stuff occasionally, but not nearly as much as I used to back in the day. But this one is special because
Yeah.
they are getting on planes and
Yeah.
flying to Birmingham to hang out with other CJ and Wright members. So,
That'll be really cool. Yeah, you have to roll out the red carpet.
yeah.
There's good food in Birmingham,
Mhm.
so you got to show them all the good food
Yeah.
places. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. I do want to leave the listeners with, you know, from your story, you know, you were a writer before, had a cancer diagnosis, led you to write an amazing book. What is something that you would tell somebody that may have a cancer diagnosis or know somebody that's going through health issues right now that just needs like a little boost of encouragement? What would you tell them?
Just say, like, you're still you. Like, when you're going through a really tough health situation, and that's the reason why my book is called Find Your Way Back, because it's about finding your way back to yourself. Because when you are going through something like that, you don't feel like yourself anymore because life looks different. You feel detached from your body, but you know, just like all of this weird stuff is going on, so you don't feel like yourself. You may be tempted to give up on some of your goals and your dreams. So all of these things happen and they make you feel like you're not yourself. But you are still there. You just got to be intentional about finding your way back to yourself. But you are still there. Just you've not lost her. You
Oh, I
just
love that.
you can't see her right now. But she's still there. She's still there.
That's beautiful. That's a good way to end this. Thank you so much, Javacia, for being on this episode with us.
Thank you for having me.